After all these years, the sad days finally come, and Euphoria's final episode has aired on TV. It aired the Sunday that just passed, and really it raised one question of, does anyone really care anymore? Euphoria is a show that really at one point in time had the culture in some kind of a chokehold. People were either all for it and were praising its unique style and really raw depiction of teenage life, whilst at the same time other people were insanely critical about how over the top it was, how explicit it could be at times, and there was always the big debate about how it glamorized some things, or if it maybe it didn't at all. I don't know. All in all, I thought it would be fun to kind of reflect a little bit on the show as a whole, and also just reflect on if this last season was good, was bad, or was it necessary? Now, a fun fact that many people might not know is that one of the first proper videos I did on this channel talking about film and TV was actually on the first season of Euphoria. And I think it would be pretty fun to reflect on ourselves a little bit here. Why not? We can go back and see what young Cammy thought about the show all the way back then. I first watched Euphoria in 2019. And that's all that we have time for. I sound like I'm going through puberty backwards, and a big tip for Cammy in the past, if you're going to do a video like this, at least sound somewhat interested in what you're talking about. That being said, that video is slightly outdated, so in the height of the show coming back as well, I did go back and rewatch all of it just to prepare and kind of remind myself if the show was actually as good as I was making out to be, or maybe it was just me overhyping it as a young person, seeing something very different and also extreme. Maybe I was just like, oh, it's cool because it really goes to places that it shouldn't. Well, in reflection, that first season is still, it's a masterpiece. I know that there's people that are still very critical on the show and probably think that I'm as much of a pretentious dickhead saying something like that, but I do stand by just how well made, well received, and well executed that first season really was. The performances across the board from people like Zendaya, Sydney Sweeney, Hunter Schafer, Jacob Elordi, Barbie Fiera, they are all absolutely still top of their game. It's crazy to view the show at a time when Colton Domingo wasn't a household name and wasn't in quite literally everything, and it's crazy to think of when the show first started just how sort of polarizing it was to a certain extent. There was the people that kind of watched it with an open mind that really, I think, received it a lot better than the people that went in with sort of a predetermined definition of what they thought the show was going to be like. Not just the performances, but it's so stylized to a point where there was a whole thing where people were talking about doing Euphoria makeup, Euphoria vibes, Euphoria aesthetic, and I do still think all of that was very cool. It was very refreshing to see a TV show like that had such a specific style. In Britain, we have like the equivalent of Euphoria called Skins, which aired many years ago, and as good as that show was, and it did have a certain vibe about it as well, it has kind of felt a little bit outdated, whereas something like this really defines those late 2010s, early 2020s, and is still very fucking cool. Not just this, but the score is also amazing. Labyrinth's soundtrack for that first season is perfect. We will jump back to him. And the show itself was just a very great time. A very small sort of story which still had a large bit of scale to it, learning about all of these complex characters, learning about little bits of their life, and all in all had a pretty great conclusion that if the show had decided to not be picked up for a season 2, or Sam Levinson said, I'm not making anymore, it would have been fine. It wrapped up a fair amount of loose ends, and it felt like the show was in a place where it really proved itself, but also didn't really have to come back and do a victory lap. Of course, the show came back for 2 special episodes a couple years later, arguably 2 of the best. I've seen people say these are the best, and they are really up there. Especially Hunter Schafer's episode, which she co-wrote, has some really great pieces of dialogue and writing behind it. It makes it all the much worse when you see exactly the place that they put her character, but we'll get there. And then finally season 2 came out. A season that was also polarizing for many different reasons. I will say that I am still a fairly big season 2 defender. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, but the drop off in quality compared to 1 and 2 is still very obvious, and it's not hidden very well. A thing that I really loved about season 2 though is the fact that although the show was keeping a lot of the same sort of aesthetics, they made the decision to jump from shooting on digital to film, and that really added so much more on for me personally. You can see the difference in the equipment that they were filming with, and it really makes the show feel kind of different but also a bit the same. It has its own personality, and a lot of the colors jump out at you a lot more. It's almost like a more summery season compared to the first. The biggest criticism for season 2 is that there's a lot of character assassination in some places. The place where they leave Sydney Sweeney's character Cassie at the end of season 1 feels very much like a complete arc for her. She isn't going to just throw herself in front of men anymore. And then all of a sudden Elodie comes around and it's like, oh well, I guess we're going in circles a little bit. It obviously brings up the stakes, puts in some more drama, and adds a lot more tense and also humorous scenes throughout the whole thing. But all in all, they kind of just go in a very strange direction with many of these characters. Not to say that that's bad, it changes some things up, but also it feels kind of completely against what some of these characters stood for, which season 3 definitely took that to a more extreme level. Completely forgot to mention Angus Cloud, who has a great arc throughout the whole show as well. It is really unfortunate with his passing away, as he was always one of my favourite parts of the entire show, and they pay some good tribute to him later on, which we'll discuss, but he was a real standout for me. Where season 2 ends felt, again, like a good sort of ending. It wasn't perfect, again, and that last scene with Rue doing her narration really felt kind of shoved in and shoehorned a little bit, but at the same time, it did an okay job. Like, if it didn't get picked up for season 3, that was fine, and that was the impression a lot of people had when it ended. There was all of this trouble between shooting 1 and 2, and maybe the show was just done for good. But of course, Sam came back and said, no, season 3's coming. And when I said at the very start of the video that I don't think many people cared anymore, I think that the big gaps in between are really great evidence for that. You have a show that ran for 7 years and only has 26 episodes. Each time it came back, whether it was the 2 special episodes, season 2, or season 3, it was like less and less people came back with it. They kind of didn't care, but me being a standby dedication loser came back every single time. And that brings us to season 3, which is easily the season that people were so much more polarized on. There was people that really hated it, people that really loved it, and, well, what was my thoughts on it? Season 3 of Euphoria is probably the most unnecessary season of television in maybe all of history. There was many points throughout all of it where I was interested in certain things going on, uninterested in a lot of things going on, but at the bare root of it, at the end of every week when the episode would finish and I'd go upstairs to bed and I'd kind of sit and lay there, all I could really think was, wow, I don't know where any of this is going, and I don't really care because all of this feels tacked on to a story that kind of ended like a couple of years ago. But before I get into any of that, I want to just read you something. This was a post from Twitter where people were trying to predict where the show would end. Obviously, they're taking the piss, but something special about these that I feel needs to be shared. Cameron Dinan presents Twitter's predictions for the final of Euphoria. Gia reveals herself that she's Alamo. Elliot gives us a 49-minute solo at Rue's funeral. Laurie kills everyone and takes Kitty's BBL appointment and becomes the baddest drug MILF in all the land. Lexi finally breaks and commits a mass shooting at Nate's funeral and everyone dies. Laurie, Lexi, and Rue become sex workers to pay off their debts to Alamo. The DEA tries to stop them, but ends up becoming sex workers too. The final of Euphoria should be Rue waking up in the middle of class and everyone looking into the camera and saying Euphoria in unison. And finally, I'm not even joking, Rue's last name is Paul and will be crowned winner of Drag Race. I included that for 2 reasons, one of which was I thought it was really funny, and the other was it just kind of showed the state of the fan base as the show went on. Like, more and more people were kind of just jumping ship and being like, this is fucking dumb. Now to start us off, let's talk about Sydney Sweeney's arc. Let's talk in this fucking season. Let's talk about some of the technical stuff first. Livingston has a clear vision for the show. It looks great throughout, like the episodes shine and pop out at you. There is clearly a lot of artistic intention behind a lot of the shots done throughout, and the Western sort of aesthetic that comes through at certain points that feels so unnecessarily weird is still like kind of cool. Some of the highlights throughout are the stuff with Daryl Britt Gibson playing Bishop, where he does some of these strange fucking Western things throughout that are actually kind of cool. The sound design and sets as well are all great. There's a sort of gross environment that is felt throughout all of this. Like, you almost have a yucky feeling watching a lot of the bits within the season, because a lot of the vibes are very off-putting and very gross. But again, it adds into the aesthetic of it, and I have no issue with any of that. The music is certainly a choice, however. Obviously, Labyrinth didn't return for this season. They brought in Hans Zimmer. And, you know, as much as there's stories about Labyrinth being a bit of a pain in the arse to work with, the score here was definitely missed, especially when you compare the first two seasons and how much his music really added on to the atmosphere and the scenes, and really resonate a lot throughout what the story was trying to do and bring to the audience. He was absolutely missed, and I'm glad he's not hung up about it. Now we get to talk about the actual scripts and story. Lordy oh lordy. Jacob Elordi did not want to be here. Throughout a lot of the start of the season, there was a feeling of like, oh, as I mentioned earlier, character assassination. Elordi's character of Nate really was on the back burner for a lot of it. He almost was playing a completely different character, a pathetic one, which in a way felt deserved and earned, but also we didn't get time to kind of see him delve into that or like become that character. So when you start off and immediately he's just this sort of punching bag for the mafia to do whatever they want with him, it's like kind of uninteresting and really like, oh, okay, we're doing this, I guess, cool. I could tell how sort of detached from the show I was at a certain point, because when his character dies, which I will say is a fucking horrifyingly executed death scene, genuinely had me shocked for a large part of it. Like, the show gets so close to being so good, but it just fails throughout so much of the writing, because a scene like that, where you actually are sat feeling so unwell watching what's happening to this guy, but at the same time all I can think is, oh well, he's dead, okay. Like, when they dug him up, I just couldn't care less. On top of that, has Alexa Demi gotten worse at performing at a certain point in her career? Because she's really felt like she was doing the bare minimum throughout. I understand the character of Maddie isn't like a demanding role, but at the same time, I'm kind of sat there like, do something. She has a lot of presence throughout this whole story and arc this season, but at the end of the day, she doesn't really deliver anything special. Apparently her character was in The Idol, and normally this would be the part of the video where I trick you and I'm like, okay, time for me to talk about all of The Idol, but come on now, no one fucking watched that. Speaking of people that gave weird performances, I have to say, Sydney Sweeney did not. Probably gave the best fucking performance this whole season, and that's coming from someone who's really not a big fan of her. She really did commit 100%. The only fault with all of that is that her story is so uninteresting and tacked on, and clearly from some outlets that have spoke about this with real OnlyFans models and sex workers, it's so like far-fetched and bullshit. So again, my biggest bit of advice, which I've given Sam Levinson for all 3 seasons, is maybe open up your writer's room. You don't have to do everything yourself. You can get people to do this research as well. Not everything relies on you. Her story was probably the least interesting out of anyone, but, you know, it was kind of fun seeing her on screen. She really gave 100% for everything she was doing, and I was never, well, I was gonna say I was never really bored, but I was pretty bored. Again, there's a great scene with her growing to be like 50 foot tall, and it's stuff like that kind of makes me sit and go, fuck, see, they're getting so close. Like, they're experimenting so much, at the same time they're throwing everything at the wall and hoping at least one thing will stick. Although there is certain scenes like that where I'm sat kind of going, oh, this is like really cool, but then, you know, 10 minutes later you're like, oh, nothing interesting has happened in this episode for fucking the whole season. Maud Apatow's there, doesn't really do anything. And that also reminds me of one of my least favourite things about this season. Stunt casting, stunt casting, stunt casting, stunt casting. Why were these people here? I am a big fan of all of the actors that kind of had a very brief moment in the show, between Sharon Stone, Natasha Lyonne, Rosalia. I'm a fan of these people, like, I like them, but, you know, what was the purpose of any of this? I understand that maybe at some point during the filming of this, there was just a fucking absolute butchering in the editing room to cut a bunch of stuff out. But when you have a character like Angel, played by Rosalia, who is getting a fair bit of screen time, and there's so much build up towards her, and then the show has no real payoff. It's like, okay, why were you here? Just thought it'd be interesting to mention. I would say out of everyone in this season, the person that really got the worst deal is by far Hunter Schafer, who is a fan favorite of the channel. We love her here, and we love her here. Yes, she just really had actually nothing to do. Every fucking week watching this was like, oh, this is going to be the Jules episode. This is going to be it this time. We're going to learn a bit more. Nope, nothing at all. Like, what was the point? I actually felt like really bad for her because she had absolutely fuck all to do. It's almost like Livingston had a fucking grudge against her for a large part of it. Like, she was a fan favorite throughout all of the show. She was arguably the most interesting character in the first season, and just to see this all get thrown away for nothing. Okay, even Schaefer's performance here isn't all that great. And that leaves us on to, well, the Rue storyline. Much like all of the shows, Zendaya's character of Rue Bennett has always kind of been at the front and center. She is the main character at the end of the day, but also there's all this other stuff going on. This whole drug arc with her and Alamo, and the guy that plays Alamo, great performance, don't know his name, but he was fantastic. This whole build up with her and the drug dealing and the DEA and the Nazis, it just was like probably the most interesting part of the whole show, to be honest. But at the same time, it felt like something completely different, which is still kind of good. I feel like it's the most true to a character that anyone is throughout the whole season. Like, I was watching that and could actually feel like I was watching the person that I've just spent the past 2 seasons watching, compared to everyone else who's kind of just doing their own thing. Like, Maud Apatow's, yeah, her character's pretty faithful, but also she's barely there. Who cares? The writing for her story is so hit or miss, with points where it really, you could have shortened the whole season down to like 6 episodes and just centered around her, and I probably would have enjoyed it a little bit more, because at least we were kind of learning more and more, and there was actually like continuity to that story. Of course, at the end, I feel like everyone kind of knew what was going to happen, and I will say my favorite parts of the last episode were the stuff kind of to do with her and her death, and her thinking that Angus Cloud's character Fez has broken out of prison. Like, it misleads the audience in an actual good way for a very brief moment of time before the show continues for another 50 minutes. I even talk about Coleman Domingo. He becomes like kind of the main character after she dies, I guess, and I didn't hate any of that stuff again. It's just Livingston trying to make a Tarantino film to some extent, and as cool as it is at points, it feels like a total left turn that I really just can't buy. I don't think it's a bad season. I don't think it's a good season. I just think it's a season that really didn't need to exist. Kind of like the last season, but also I enjoyed that one a bit more, so. I don't even really think it's tarnished the reputation of the show. I think the show and everyone involved to a certain point has tarnished that. There's all of this rumors and bullshit that Twitter just kind of invents that is based on nothing, saying how, certain actors hate each other, Livingston's a dickhead. I really don't have all that much against Sam Livingston. I think he seems like a normal enough guy, and he clearly like is kind of good at writing some things. I think his biggest issue is he might be a bit of a narcissist and just won't invite more people to like collaborate a bit. And that's kind of what the show felt like it needed. It needed someone else. Compared to Too Many Cooks in the Kitchen, there's one cook and he's trying to cook for the whole fucking restaurant. Hire some writers for your next project if he works again, which he will. We know he will. The greatest issues with many of his things are the script and the story, and it is simply rooted down to not enough collaboration, I think. I think he's an okay writer, but he could really excel with some help. But yeah, it feels so abrupt to end the video like this, but that's my Euphoria video. It's kind of anticlimactic, isn't it? Like the show, full circle. Thank you so much for watching this video on Euphoria Season 3 and just the whole show, I guess. Let me know what you thought of it, if you watched it, if you could be bothered to watch it. And just the show as a whole, I guess. And I will see you in the next one. Now, to start us off, let's talk about Sydney Sweeney's arch.